Wake up every morning with just the news. All the news and none of the noise.
Hey there, good morning and welcome here to Just the News AM. I am Carrie Sheffield and so glad that you're here with us. Well, today is Groundhog's Day. It's February 2nd and this is just a sign of the times. The groundhog reportedly is checking about his shadow online remotely. Can you believe this? I have no idea. It sounds so ridiculous, but apparently there will be 6 more weeks of winter, according to Patuxent Phil. He predicted as he emerged from his burrow on a snowy Tuesday morning to perform his Groundhog Day duties. There you see Phil, the most famous groundhog, and there he is. You can see this was all done remote. They didn't want to have the crowds, and the folks there, they've got their masks on. They are not socially distanced, but rain or snow or COVID pandemic, they're going to proceed with this. So I give them props for this. But it's all just kind of a sign of the times here about how ridiculous this all is. But anyway, so wishing you all a happy Groundhog Day. It feels like Groundhog Day in Washington. Every day, it's another day. It's more about how is the government going to spend your money, how are our rights going to be taken away, and how should we be pushing back on that. So joining me to discuss this is Mr. David Keene. He's editor-at-large for the Washington Times. Good morning, David.
Morning. You know, they must have more sunshine up there in New Hampshire than we have here, or else that groundhog's got very good eyes.
That is a very good point. I don't know. I don't know how he could see his shadow.
It looked like it was snowing.
It was snowing. I don't know how you see your shadow if there's no sun to project a shadow. This is a very good point. But as far as the what's happening here in Washington, so you've been around this conservative movement for a long time. You led the American Conservative Union. You led the National Rifle Association. From your vantage point, what does the conservative movement do from here?
Well, I think that, if you look at the history of America, one thing that you can almost count on, regardless of party, is that whichever party wins overreaches. And that's happening very quickly with this administration because Joe Biden was not elected to do the things he's already doing. He was elected and he put himself up as the unifier and sort of the not Donald Trump candidate and managed to eke out a victory. But he's been operating since the inauguration more executive orders than any president in U.S. history on issues that were not part of the campaign in any meaningful way. For example, while he appointed Beto O'Rourke from Texas to be in charge of his gun policies, that was never discussed during the campaign except on his webpage. But then even before the inauguration, he said one of his goals is to, quote, defeat the NRA. And he's got a whole series of Second Amendment restrictions that he wants either to do by regulation or through Congress. Same thing is true on a whole other group of issues. The likelihood is that the conservative side, the Republicans and conservatives in general, have to get their act together. But at the same time, he's going to be playing into their hands by doing what other presidents have done, and that's overreaching at the beginning of his
Do you think he's doing this not because he necessarily wants to, because Joe Biden, the man himself, for 40 years, there was an interesting profile. When he was in the 60s, he wasn't there getting arrested. He wasn't there being a beatnik. He wasn't there being anti-war. He wasn't there snorting cocaine on campus. He was wearing the loafers and he was a prep and he was very much of an establishment kind of person.
Right.
That's how he's spent most of his career in the Senate. Do you think he's doing this because basically he's being yanked to the left by his base?
Well, on some issues, and somebody pointed out that he's been described as a centrist, and it's always been true that he is a centrist. He's always been at the center of the Democratic Party. The problem is the center of the Democratic Party today is a lot different than it was in 1970. So just by that calculation, and he's a calculating politician, being in the center puts you far to the left of your previous self, if you will. So in that sense, he may be consistent, but he's also got a party that has, because it's moved so far, is able to leverage him. His goal was to be president. He's got certain beliefs and certain biases and all that, but he's not an ideological politician. But he plays to those he needs for support. And within the Democratic Party, both in the primary and now as president, because of the makeup of the party and the makeup of the congressional side of the party. He has to play to the left and will. And I think that whether, the question is not, do you believe this? The question is, are you doing it? And he's doing what they want him to do.
Right. Well, what about the Republican Party and conservatives at this point? Because there are two women right now in the Republican Party who are embattled. Liz Cheney has her leadership post is potentially coming under fire. She's the number 3 Republican in the House, and she's coming under a lot of fire because she voted to impeach President Trump the second go around. And then you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's coming under fire for very different reasons, for posts that she had made in the past that were endorsing violence against Democrats, which are very troubling. And then she also has said that the Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax. She has since gone back and scrubbed her social media. She's reached out reportedly to one of the mothers of a child who was lost and said, no, I don't believe that it's a hoax. So it appears she's trying to clean up her act a bit. But what do you think this says about the future of the Republican Party? What's your prediction for these two women?
Well, Liz Cheney is a very bright politician. I would not have advised her to do what she did, but overall she's been a big plus in the Congress for Republicans. Every party and every if you look at the Democratic caucus in the House and the Republican caucus, there are a few outliers. People that the mainstream part of the party says are a little out of it, and they may or may not be, but generally speaking, they're tolerated and put up with. You remember the period when some Democrats were claiming that the CIA created AIDS and all of this as an anti-black thing. Well, under today's rules, you'd look at that and you say, well, maybe we ought to throw them out of Congress. Ordinarily, that's not what you do. Ordinarily, you isolate them because their views are so different from everybody else's. They're elected by their constituents. They say what they say, and you move on.
Right. Would you advise Kevin McCarthy to strip her of her committee assignments?
To do what?
To strip her of her committee assignments.
I have rarely gotten involved in that because that's like talking about the high school class officers. That's really an internal deal. And I think what's going to happen is all of this is going to pass because of what we talked about a minute ago. With the Democratic positions that are being taken, Republicans are going to unite. The battles over Trump, the battles over all this stuff are going to be passé, and we're going to be on to a new battle. And I think that's what's going to happen.
All right, David Keene, stay with us. We'll be right back. We got more with Bob Whitson. He has a new movement here of mothers whose children died in violence, but they say don't defund the police, and they're speaking out. Stay tuned.